said that he would help us with the launch of it, and I'd love for you to be involved with Dave and John involved as well. Yeah. That would be wonderful. Okay. All right, good. You made my day. I'm just going to call you when I'm having a bad day.
I'm surprised you got Tiffany blue. I was going to say, like...
I would wear that, but they think I'm an ornament.
No, you can pull it off. You can
those blue eyes will probably pop out, right?
And hi, I'm
I'm
Lori.
Nice to
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
I was waiting for it. Oh, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Nice to meet you too. Thank you for being here. Yeah. I mean, I have no doubt about that. I just it's received again. So good to see you. All right. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
You know, you walk into a room, you're like,
a little bit, mostly speaking. No, we do some psychology, but most of what we do is to support
yes, I'm talking about
politics,
yes.
whole focus is on that.
It's happening a lot to me lately.
It's hard to tell with the face.
With the face, you can't tell.
Oh, yeah? All that.
Yeah, but that was all from the house. So we gave away books from Black authors, we gave away art shows, we gave away sneakers, whatever it is. It was pretty cool. We're looking forward to it. Now one of our big initiatives is just kind of helping us with it. So there's a couple of nice developments. So we made it. And all the church. So we got that food, whatever. All of this is
Round him up.
Hey, I don't know yet. I'm just on the table.
All right, thanks.
Oh, wonderful. Great.
Say hi to me.
All right. Oh, you know what?
Sir, how are you? Everything good on your end?
It is.
Yeah, that's it, right?
That's good. We can live.
You are good. That's right. Easy out.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We are so excited that you all have come to join us on this evening for this community conversation. I am Pastor Samaj here at Second Baptist Church, and we welcome you into this space, this fellowship hall. We are a church in the community, for the community, and serving the community. And so we continue to do that in this event on tonight. It's going to be a great time, right? This is a time where so many times we ask questions about, we ask questions to people who don't have the answers. And so this is another opportunity for us to be able to ask the questions for people, with people who have more answers than I'm sure you have. And this is our opportunity to do so. We also want to welcome those who are watching online, and we're glad that you all are joining us online, and we're also glad that everyone is here with us. I have the distinct honor and privilege of welcoming here with us in the Acting Attorney General, Andrew Brooke. And so he is our state's Chief Law Enforcement Officer and head of the Department of Law and Public Safety. And he's here with us, taking time to right here in Asbury Park. And for that, we are extremely grateful. And so why don't you help me in welcoming our Acting Attorney General, Andrew Brooke.
Well, thank you, Pastor, for the kind introduction, and thank you to everyone for being here today. Look, I spend a lot of my time sitting in an office in Trenton, as do some of the folks who are here with us today. And I think it's really important that in doing this work, that doing the work of protecting the residents of New Jersey, that we get out of our offices in Trenton, and that we come to church basements, that we come to school cafeterias, that we meet the community where they are to hear about their concerns, to hear about their frustrations, and to answer their questions. And I actually think there is no work that I do that is more important than coming out to have meetings like this. I know that there are gaps between various communities in New Jersey and law enforcement. Those gaps are real. They have existed for decades and for centuries, and we have the hard work to do to try to build bridges between law enforcement and the communities they serve. In order to do that, we need to explain to folks what we do, the work that we do to try to protect the community, but we also need to listen. We also need to hear about people's concerns. We need to take in their frustrations and then make sure that we're responding to it appropriately. So I thought it was important that we come here today to tell you a little bit more about the work that we do, but also to listen and to hear what you all have to say. So several years ago, former Attorney General Graywall created what's called the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability in the AG's office. And it was something that had never existed before. And it's designed to do two things that you don't often see paired together. The first is to investigate criminal activity, certain types of criminal activity that violate the public's trust. The second thing that OPIA is designed to do is to engage in policy reforms, to think about how the criminal justice system is working, or more importantly, how it's not working, and try to figure out how we can improve that system for everyone. So the first part of OPIA's work is investigating individual cases, and that involves investigating corrupt public officials, as well as investigating law enforcement officers who violate the public trust, including by engaging in official misconduct, and including by violating our state's civil rights laws, by engaging in improper use of force. That's one of the things we do. And then separately, OPIA thinks about what kinds of policies do we have to limit the use of force across the board in the state, and also to think about what kinds of procedures and protocols can we put in place so that this type of criminal activity isn't happening in the first place. And we decided to put those two things together because often one informs the other. You might be investigating officer-involved shootings in the state, and you will see the same set of facts appearing multiple times. And you will want to not just handle those individual cases, but to figure out what can we learn from those cases and design policy so that we're applying it to every law enforcement agency in this state. And that's exactly what OPIA does. When we created OPIA several years ago, we thought it was important to bring in someone with unimpeachable integrity, an experienced prosecutor, someone who's not afraid to fight tough fights, to handle this type of work. And we found that in Tom Eicher, who's here today. Tom has spent 30 years as a federal prosecutor, and he has locked up everyone from dirty cops to congressmen. Tom is an exceptionally experienced prosecutor and has embraced the challenges that these cases present. In building out his team, Tom also brought over Carolyn Murray, also a former federal prosecutor, spent a number of years as the acting Essex County prosecutor up in Newark, and also serving as a Superior Court judge up north. So we have folks who really understand our criminal justice system, who I think are fearless, not afraid to take on tough cases, and not afraid to think about how we can fix the system as a whole. So I think, as some of you know, several years ago, the legislature signed a law that required that the Attorney General's office, rather than county prosecutors, investigate all fatal police encounters in the state. So it's now all consolidated in one office. It is now consolidated under Tom and Carolyn. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we do these cases fairly? How do we make sure that we do them fully, fairly, thoroughly, independent of any potential bias? And we have created a number of policies and protocols to implement that, to make sure that we're doing these cases well. But we also recognize that you can create the best policies in the world, but if you don't take the time to sit down with folks and explain to them what those policies are, they're just a piece of paper. So we're here tonight to walk you through what we have done to investigate fatal police encounters so that you all understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, our commitment to doing it fairly, thoroughly, impartially, and then to also give you the opportunity to ask questions about the process that we've set up. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and Carolyn, who's going to walk us through how this process works, and then we'll come back up for questions afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you, General. And that'd be great, Tom. Thank us. I would appreciate that. So good evening. I too appreciate you being here. I'm going to dive right in because I think the most important part of our meeting tonight will be our engagement. Any questions and responses? So I'm going to try to move quickly. Please stop me if you feel I'm moving too quickly. So I'm going to start with what is the function of the grand jury? Because I'm going to share with you, before I went to law school, I had literally no idea what a grand jury did. Now, a young assistant who helped me today told me that since she watched Law and Order since she was a young kid, she does know what the grand jury does, so I won't spend too much time on this. I went to law school before Law and Order, I have to say. A grand jury first of all, a grand jury is 16 to 23 people. 23 people are selected by a court to serve as the grand jury. They meet alone, meaning no judge, no defense attorney. They are a committee of citizens. Their function is to determine whether there's sufficient evidence to establish that a crime has been committed and that a particular individual probably committed that crime, that there's probable cause to believe that. It's a screening mechanism intended to ensure that before an individual is required to go through the whole trial process, that there's adequate evidence to hold them into that process. As you probably do know, once you reach the next stage of the process, the burden that the state has is not showing probable cause, it's showing evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And in that final phase, the trial phase, a jury must be unanimous. The grand jury, we need a majority, not a unanimous verdict. The grand jury is, so in officer-involved fatal encounter matters, what we're here to talk about today, the grand jury has to determine whether the evidence shows that an officer acting in his or her official capacity probably, if there's probable cause, probably committed criminal homicide, official misconduct, or any other criminal charge during an encounter with a civilian. That's what the grand jury is there to decide. The grand jury is told by the judge who selects the grand jury that they serve as the conscience of the community in that regard. Okay. In general, in most other factual and legal scenarios, at least that I'm aware of, the decision about what incidents should be presented to a grand jury is made by a prosecutor. In the federal system, it's the United States Attorney's Office. In the state system, it's either the county prosecutor's office or the attorney general's office. New Jersey is fairly unique in that 2 years ago, the legislature passed a statute, a law, that says that the attorney general's office, so acting General Brooke's office, is required to conduct investigations of a person's death that occurs during an encounter with a law enforcement officer. That's the first requirement. The second requirement is that all such investigations be presented to a grand jury. So that means that our office does not have discretion, does not have decision-making authority to decide which fatal encounters go before the grand jury and which don't. All fatal encounters that meet the definition have to go before the grand jury. So that takes us to the question of what is an encounter? Okay, what do we mean by encounter? An encounter has been understood by our office broadly because we want to follow the law. So a situation where an officer shoots and kills a civilian is one such encounter. Anything from that level down to situations, which we've had several of, where the police are called to respond to a suicide in progress. And if the police use any degree of force in connection with encountering that suicidal person, the matter has to be reviewed, has to be screened by the grand jury to make a determination if the officer committed any crime in the course of that encounter. The grand jury presentations are mandatory, and there's three kinds of cases that are fatal encounters, or at least as best we can group them into categories. One is the use of force by a law enforcement officer resulting in death. So that would be if a police officer, for example, shoots and kills a person during an encounter on duty in connection with him being a police officer. The death of a civilian in an encounter with any law enforcement officer. So if there's a circumstance where officers have to put hands on somebody and that person dies in the course of that interaction, that's a fatal police encounter also. It doesn't have to be a gunshot, it doesn't have to be the use of the service revolver. And finally, the death of a civilian while in the custody of law enforcement, where the death could be plausibly linked to the actions of a law enforcement officer, whether through use of force or reckless indifference to human life. So any death of a person who is either in a local county correctional facility or in state prison also falls within this statute. So how do we go about investigating these encounters? There is a whole separate directive on how those investigations are to be conducted, and the 10-step process that's been put in place. That's available online. All you have to do, we do it many times a week, is put in NJ, New Jersey, AG directives, and you will see all of the directives that are public. This directive is from the year 2019, and it was directive number 4. It's available online, and we will not go through that very lengthy directive today, but it does establish certain principles, and one of them is to avoid conflicts of interest while investigating these fatal, tragic encounters. So the guiding principle is that OPIA, which is comprised of lawyers, detectives, and they're paired up with the state police, except when the case itself involves state police, work together, go to the county where this incident occurred, and investigate the encounter, the circumstances, what got the police there, what actions the police took, and all of the surrounding circumstances. The type of conflicts that we are seeking to avoid are conflicts that grow up very naturally in the counties if the county is doing the investigation. Often an officer, if a county prosecutor were to do the investigation, and for years we did do them, for many years we did them before this statute, we would run into problems where the officer investigating the shooting maybe came from that department originally. The officer investigating that shooting went to the academy with that officer, or people are frequently related, whether it's by bonds of family or marriage, friendship. We would seek, at least in my experience, to try to take people off those cases if they were really closely related. But there's no question that having the State Office of Public Integrity and Accountability cuts down on the chance that anybody knows anybody, that anybody has that type of relationship. And each case is screened, and the executive director signs off on the fact that no lead investigator has a conflict of interest with any of the individuals involved in the actual encounter. Now, there is a component of our investigation that involves the support of the New Jersey chapter of the National Black Prosecutors Association, and actually one of the individuals who is working with us in that regard is on his way here from Essex County, so I'm going to wait to talk about that part of the program till the very end because I think he'll be here. But the New Jersey chapter of the National Black Prosecutors Association has stepped forward and volunteered to have willing, experienced prosecutors be part of the team that investigates fatal police encounters in certain particularly difficult cases. They will be doing this outside the counties where they work because of the same concern about a conflict of interest. They will be part of the investigation. They will be part of the presentation to the grand jury at the conclusion of the investigation. So, prior to presenting the case to the grand jury, a great deal of work is done. Obviously, the investigation proceeds from the crime scene itself to the interviews of witnesses to the very important gathering of video, which more and more cases now involve video, whether it is police video, body-worn, motor vehicle, store video, individuals who are present videoing what's happening as it occurs. All available video evidence, all statements of eyewitnesses and officers, and any other forensic evidence must be thoroughly reviewed. There is a very extensive legal memo that's drafted and sent through the executive director, and the case is only deemed ready to go to grand jury when all of that groundwork has been done. And the supervisors have made sure that all of the relevant witnesses, civilian witnesses, police witnesses, anybody with knowledge about what occurred has been interviewed, and those reports are prepared. It is possible to charge a case. Of course. You want to put it up here?
No, I need to record this. America needs to hear this, especially Asbury Park. I'd like to record it. This is too much information. America needs to hear you speak.
So it is possible to charge by way of complaint prior to grand jury in certain cases. But because we have a statute that requires that every single case go before the grand jury, it will only be in a very egregious and exceptional case that the original charging authority would be executed by the office as opposed to first taking the case before the grand jury. So, family meetings. Immediately after an incident occurs, we have a family liaison staff in our office who reach out to the family of the decedent. They make contact with the family. They explain the process to the family as I'm trying tonight to explain it to you. Now, It is not possible to expect a family to absorb information of this sort that night. So the initial contact is a very brief contact, and one of the goals of that contact is to see if the incident happened in a home, do they have a place to stay that night? Do they need any services? Do they need immediate housing? We then proceed to have at least 2 more offers to the family to meet with us if they wish, to explain the process, to show them any video that may exist of the incident before it is released to the public. The purpose of this, even though I believe it can be highly traumatic for families, is to avoid a scenario where you're standing in Best Buy and you see come over, at least up north, it's Channel 12, you see video of your loved one in their final moments without being prepared. Okay, so that's the purpose of that meeting. Our family liaison folks are trained. They provide links to counseling and services if people want them. We can have a crisis counselor available at the meeting if folks, if we feel that that would be helpful. We don't force this on anyone. People may not want it. If the family is represented by an attorney, the attorney may attend the meeting as well. There is also, if the autopsy report has not been prepared at the time of that first meeting, there will be a second meeting where the family can review the autopsy report. We do not provide a copy of that to family until after the grand jury hearing is complete, because it can, in certain cases, compromise the integrity of the investigation. We may not want everyone who is testifying before the grand jury to know all the details, but obviously the family has a right to that report, and they receive a copy of it after the grand jury presentation. I think it's important to know that every grand jury that hears this type of case in New Jersey is instructed on all of the relevant statutes. Okay, so that includes all of the homicide statutes in New Jersey. That's murder, aggravated manslaughter, reckless manslaughter, excuse me. In certain cases, statutes such as death by auto may be relevant, official misconduct may be relevant, aggravated assault may be relevant. The grand jury is also entitled, and we are required, to know about the law regarding justification. All right? It is the law that officers, just like civilians, can use force in self-defense. Officers, just like civilians, can use force for the protection of third parties. And officers, under very limited circumstances, can use high levels of force to effectuate law enforcement objectives. But that is only in connection with very serious crimes that officers are investigating. So all of that law is read to each grand jury who sits to hear these cases. They know that these offenses exist. We are available to recharge, reinstruct on any statute at any time. The grand jurors also have, and this is a new practice in New Jersey, a copy of the relevant law in a folder in front of them if they wish to return to it and review it themselves. Some people absorb information better auditorily. Some people absorb information better if they read it. The grand jurors have both options. The principles that the Attorney General has, because I know he was intimately involved with this when prior Attorney General Gerbere Graywall approved this SOP, are that the presentations are to be done with neutrality, in a neutral fashion. Evidence must be presented in an objective manner, giving no indication of the assigned prosecutor's personal view, if they have one, about what the outcome should be, or whether or not an indictment against the officer is warranted. The evidence that's presented should be direct. So when it comes to the critical video evidence, our prosecutors do not describe what you might see on the video, they show the video. Now, some of these incidents have hours and hours of video that's not direct. So the grand jurors are told, we have additional video at your request. You can watch all of it. Whatever you want, it's here. but we show rather than describe the critical video. A third principle for presentation is that relevant evidence goes before the grand jury. So we present the items of evidence that are important to the decision the jury must make. We don't present so much unrelated information that the jury can't sort through and find the critical information. We try to make it understandable as best we can to recreate an incident and episode that generally takes place in a very short period of time. And finally, consistency. We are attempting through our pre-grand jury process. There's a meeting before every presentation with myself, with the executive director, with the DAG, reviews with us exactly who they're going to call as witnesses, exactly what video they're going to present, exactly what evidence they are going to bring forward. Now, of course, the DAG cannot know what questions the grand jurors may ask, so they will respond to those in the grand jury. But it's important that the grand jurors who hear, some of the grand juries are hearing several cases, not in a row, but one week, perhaps another 2 weeks later, that they get a consistent presentation so that they're not distracted by differences in style or differences in, some attorneys would show 30 videos, some attorneys would show the 5 that show the incident, if we didn't attempt to try to have a consistent approach in each case. At the conclusion of the presentation of evidence, the grand jury votes, all right? As I think I mentioned earlier, a grand jury operates by way of majority. It does not operate, it doesn't have to be unanimous the way a petit jury has to be. If anybody's ever been on jury duty for a trial, you know that all 12 people must vote unanimously. So if a majority of the grand jury finds probable cause to conclude that a subject officer's conduct meets the elements of an offense, whether it's official misconduct, aggravated assault, murder, manslaughter, if a majority finds that, then they go on to another issue. Let me restate that. That's the ultimate question. Is there probable cause to believe a criminal offense was committed? They are first asked if they are in a majority belief that the officer's conduct caused the death, and then they're asked if that conduct on the police part was justified or not. And if the grand jury finds it was not a justified use of force, then they can determine what charges should be brought against the officer, brought to them for a vote. Okay? And if no such majority exists, then the legal term for the outcome is a no bill. So a true bill is a bill indicating criminal charges. A no bill is a vote indicating no criminal charges. After the vote, if the determination by the grand jury is a no bill, a public statement is issued by the Attorney General's office, which will include the factual findings from the investigation and the result and legal analysis by the grand jury. As I spoke with you about earlier, because our office doesn't decide which of these cases goes to the grand jury, there is a chance that a grand jury could return an indictment that has no evidence to support it. In that case, the office would have to consider what to do about that particular indictment, and there is a provision in the standard operating procedure that there can be a motion to dismiss counts if there's no evidence to support the counts. Additionally, there can be a motion to dismiss counts if a witness or a critical piece of evidence is no longer available by the time we get to trial. In all cases, the investigation is made known to the Professional Standards Department of the officer's employer. So I live up in Morris County, if, let's say in Morris Plains, there was an incident, if the officer was no-billed, all of the investigative materials go back to the Morris Plains Department to determine if there is any internal affairs issue, if there's a training issue, if there's some, excuse me, need for a change in policy, or if there's a need for disciplinary action against the officer. Oh, thank you. So that's what happens at the end of each case. The case is referred back to the employing agency through the prosecutor's office, and both the prosecutor's office and the AG's office has to monitor whether any administrative or disciplinary action is taken against any officer. Obviously, if there is an indictment, that would only happen after the criminal process against the officer. So we tried to get this down to the shortest possible accurate representation of the process. Bryn advised me, as did Tom, to take out my reference to the grand jury starting in the 13th century and coming here from England. So we tried to, again, get to the relevant information. I don't know if we want General at this point to proceed if there's any questions here. And if you don't mind, Reverend, if our AP support person arrives, maybe we'll introduce him afterward. Absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, I know we just heard a lot of information, and we're grateful for you sharing that with us. Because I just learned a lot, right? And you get to hear about the process that's happening. This is our time for question and answer. I am going to get a mic that is going to be placed on that stand there. And what will happen is that we'll ask one person at a time to step up to the mic. Please keep your mask on, ask your question, and then either the acting attorney general or one of his team will be able, who is equipped to best answer that question, will answer that question. Let me make just two notes. One is that that the acting attorney general and team are law enforcers, right? They're not law creators, and they're not the legislators that create the laws, and so they are only able to enforce the laws that are in place. And we want to make sure that we just keep that understanding in mind, that we are asking them not about the laws that are on that exist, but we are asking them about how they enforce the laws that are present. And then the second thing is that we want to, they cannot answer, you can ask questions, but they cannot answer questions about specific cases, especially if they are active cases, but you can ask them questions about the process. And we've heard about it here, in this presentation, but you can now ask them questions about the process, and they'll be glad to answer those questions. So with that, I know we just had, come on up. Yeah.
So I had made brief reference to the fact that the New Jersey chapter of the National Black Prosecutors Association came forward to former Attorney General Graywall, indicating concern about the communities in which they, like we, were both living and working and experiencing the concern over these type of incidents. So one of our assistant prosecutor volunteers for this purpose is Mr. Anthony Higgins. We happen to have a prior acquaintance through the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. As I indicated earlier, Mr. Higgins will not be working on Essex County cases. He will be working on other county cases, meaning cases out of the county, so that he too will not have any ties to either officers, decedent's families, or the situational facts of the cases that he's investigating. So we're going on to question and response. Maybe there will be some you can help us respond to, Anthony, but would you be able to just briefly indicate why the organization decided to step forward and become engaged in some of this work?
First of all, good evening, everyone. what you're here for and what's going on is crucially important. Our current Attorney General, of course, understands that, as our prior Attorney General has understood that. As a member of the New Jersey chapter of the Black Prosecutors Association, while we were in the process of putting that chapter together, I think the prior Attorney General, and to a certain extent, Callan Murray would acknowledge, I was one of the main voices that stood up and said that there needs to be not just transparency in the process, which is crucial in every neighborhood, which is crucial for every community, but that there needs to be both access and equity in the process. And that was one of the things that the National Black Prosecutors, the New Jersey chapter, has been pushing, that we need to have access and equity in the process. Clearly, and I think everyone can understand that in doing that, I, as an Essex County resident and being a part of that prosecutor's office, could not involve myself in cases where I may know someone or cases involved in our county. However, the idea is to make sure that there are individuals who are independent of the local municipalities, the local government, and the local power structure looking into these cases to ensure A, transparency, B, equity, and really the most important thing when I look at cases, when I talk to my colleagues and in my involvement, justice. And that's something that is paramount, is to make sure that at the end of the day, justice is sought, and that if we are successful, justice is earned and received. I will not attempt to guess at what was said before I came. I have to apologize. I had a commitment that prevented me from being here timely, and again, I ask you your indulgence, and I offer my apology for that. With that, I will step down.
Thank you. And I also want to, we're going to get to questions. I also want to say for those who are watching online that I'll be monitoring the live chat. And so if you have questions, feel free to enter them there. And at the time that we're able to do so, I'll make sure that we engage. First question, Banu. Oh, can you come to the mic so we can hear right there in the middle? Thanks.
I just wanted to ask the brother what was the difference between the black prosecutors and the prosecutor's office.
So as always, I appreciate the question. We're not having a difference in the Black Prosecutors Association New Jersey chapter and any particular prosecutor's office. So I'm sort of give you two answers. Both are important. First and foremost, we are all prosecutors. The prosecutors' offices are all at the county level, the attorney general's at the state level. So it's not as if there is a black prosecutor's office. I don't want to give that impression. However, as black prosecutors and minority prosecutors, everyone in the organization is not black. It is really a minority organization. We understand that there are times when transparency and inclusion is going to be paramount. There are times in the past where the voice that speaks, the voice that may give information, may not be heard as well when they're looking at an audience that's not used to them. And we understand that. We also understand that we want to make sure both for those who may have had violence done to them or those that are accused of doing violence or criminal activity, it's important that there is eyes looking at it and understanding the perspective both of those who are accused as well as those who are victims. Understand, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a prosecutor. My goal is to make sure that justice is done for the community and for victims. But at the same time, justice has to take into account who is accused. It has to. Thank you.
All right, yeah.
I have two questions. One is, do the officers and their lawyer have an opportunity to be at the grand jury to argue also?
It's a great question. The officers are, the lawyers are not. The officers are given the opportunity to testify, and then they're given the opportunity to be asked questions by the grand jurors and answer those questions. If they were to attempt to, if you will, argue, that would be cut off because this is not a trial and they are not advocates, but they are entitled, if they choose, we give them the opportunity to appear and to testify. Additionally, sir, many of the officers will give a statement after the incident, and that is videotaped. That videotaped statement is played for the grand jury.
Okay.
Did you have a second question?
And my second question is, here in Asbury Park, we had a unit called the Street Crimes Unit. And for decades, I would say 2 decades, they was operating around here unhinged. They did everything from assaulting people to false charges to thefts. Now, and they dismantled this unit because we were putting so much pressure on the city and taking pictures and videos of them, of some of the things they was doing in the street. Some of these same officers are still on the force and have committed crimes against people here. Stole money, assaulted people, gave people false charges. Now, we've done petitioned the city many times to address this, and they haven't done it. As a matter of fact, one of the officers, who was one of the main guys on the Street Crimes Unit, has a lawsuit against the city. And in his lawsuit, he mentions that the supervisors were directing that unit to go out here and target the minority community. Now, as a community activist and someone who's born and raised here and who's been through everything here, I refuse to let this go because I see some of these same officers walking around here getting paychecks, acting as if they never done anything wrong. And that's not fair to our community. So who could we go to in the Attorney General office to address that Street Crimes Unit? And we also have some pictures of them in the act of doing things and video.
So perhaps, Director Eicher, do you want to address that, or I can?
You can send the information to me. I'll give you my card.
Okay. Yes, come with me.
And I think, you know, it sounds like, sir, you have awareness already that internal affairs complaints can be made at all stages, from the department to the county prosecutor to the Attorney General's office, yes, and they will be accepted.
We tried that here with the Asbury Internal Affairs. Even in the guy's complaint, he mentioned how, you know, who was in charge at the time. They did away with the complaints that was on file. And it's always they send you a paper, oh, we find no merit.
All right. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Phillips. I have so many questions, I don't even know where to begin. Okay, this is my take of the situation. Asbury Park, Neptune, Long Branch, everyone knows these are violent crimes here. These are violent towns here, okay? Now, this is the problem here. There is a lot of gun activities among its residents, and it's a lot of gun activities amongst the police officers, okay? Now, here in Asbury Park, you have to start at the top. You have to get rid of the top here, okay? Prosecutor Christopher Giamatti, whatever his name is, he should have been out the door, okay? He reissued the gun that was given to Officer Seidel to kill his wife, okay? He issued the gun to Officer Seidel after his wife complained about, my husband is beating me up, my husband is beating me up. They don't give a damn. Neptune, Asbury Park don't give a damn. I've called Asbury, Neptune Police Department over 100 times because my daughter is currently in a domestic violence relationship. You know what the Neptune Police Department told me? If I call one more time, that they would start charging me for coming out to my house, okay? Neptune Township don't give a damn about its residents or domestic violence. Because you see, first of all, it goes like this. The prosecutor, start with him. He hires, he employs all the police in the Monmouth County. You not telling telling me that your prosecutor did not know that Officer Seidel was beating up his wife? You telling me that the prosecutor don't know that Sean DeSada shot Hassani Best in broad daylight? But yet he get to go to work in the morning? You're telling me this. You're telling me this. No, what happens? The prosecutor who's being sued his damn self, what do? He steps down. Y'all don't fire him. Y'all don't charge him. Y'all don't do nothing to the man. He's untouchable. He's untouchable. And what do? He opens up a law firm. He steps down after reissuing the gun that was used to kill Officer Seidel's wife. Okay? They can't prosecute him in freehold because he's everybody's boss. He's everybody's boss, for God's sakes. Which one of Christopher Giamatti's employees is going to rat this man out? Nobody. You know why? Because then it's going to seem like the whole department is in on it together. That's how that works. And you can't prosecute him in the Ocean County. You know why? Because his wife is a judge there, and she got connects everywhere. That's how that works. The Asbury Neptune police officers walk around like they the shit here. They don't wear a face mask at all during the pandemic. And they're ready to lock them up. But you know what I tell them bastards? 6 feet. 6 feet. Don't come nowhere near me. Are you vaccinated? That's how I come. I don't trust none of these police officers.
Nancy,
how is there so much crimes going on?
Let me ask you a question.
Hold on.
Real quick.
I'm not finished.
Let me
talk.
ask you.
How is it so?
Nancy.
Why is there so many crimes going on, yet you got cameras everywhere? Everywhere in Asbury Park. But you got all these unsolved mysteries. How? How do Officer Sean DeSada get up and he killed the man in broad daylight and still clocking in for work in the morning? And then, I don't know if y'all know, well, y'all know it, the Asbury Park Long Branch beef has been going on forever. Forever. Okay, kids are dying over beefs, and y'all are doing nothing. But locking niggas up. That's all y'all doing. My son is getting jumped, left and right. I call. 100 kids came to my house. It's all on live. Everything I'm saying is recorded. I record everything. Aren't you the prosecutor? You're not the lady who was going to try to prosecute my son when you should have been prosecuting your boss. You're not that chick, are you? Because you know, man, you have words in court. Right? You have words in court. It's the whole police department, the public defender's office. I had the public defender, Miss Williams, or whatever her name is, I called to confirm my son's court appearance. You know, the lady blocked me. I got everything recorded. The lady blocked me. Because you know what?
So let me ask you a question. And listen, we appreciate your story, and we know, and it has value.
And nothing is going to happen.
So let's ask you a question.
Officer Sean DeSada is clocking into work tomorrow morning.
Right.
I bet you that. But let me go out there and kill a man. Let me kill a man, and you tell me, what job am I going to? Tell me that.
Yeah. I'm sorry for your pain. I really am.
It's not even just me. It's the community. Those inmates that are sitting in Monmouth County Jail, it goes like this. Okay, the judges and all of them don't like me. My son got into a situation, okay, where 100 kids came to my house to jump my son. Okay, the Neptune police came. You know what they did? They drove through, looked at all these kids who's throwing up gang signs. There's all types of shit in front of my front yard. They do nothing. I'm on live now. Everybody's like, what happened to the cop? What happened to the cop? So, my son's getting beat up in school 3 days straight. He doesn't go to court the next day, because then when he do go to school, he has Mason to protect his son. Okay, his stuff, because he's been getting jumped all damn week. He's been getting jumped at the mall. He's been getting jumped everywhere he goes, he gets jumped, right? They call the police. The same officer who locked my son up at the Neptune Middle School for having mace on his possession is the same officer that when I went to get my son said, oh, Miss Phillips, oh, this is crazy. I know firsthand your son is getting jumped. I witnessed it firsthand. I said, hold that thought, because I might need you to testify in court for me. The same Neptune Middle School who called the police and said that my son had mace was the same school that said, Miss Phillips, if you need me to testify on your son's behalf, I will. Right. Neptune Middle School can't talk about my son when the vice principal, for God's sakes, Mr. Smurl, is on live throwing beer in people's face. I mean, y'all got to start with the leaders here. All our leaders are crooked as fuck. They robbed the boss away for thousands of dollars, but yet it's poor applicants need to fill out an application, a credit check to live their boss away. Meanwhile, The owner or the super, whatever the hell they call it, done robbed the place for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
You got to start with your leaders if you expect any type of work in our community. People are not going to snitch on each other. We're not going to do that.
Right.
Why would I snitch on my brother when the police don't snitch on themselves?
Right.
They don't snitch. They're a brotherhood. They watch this shit firsthand and act like they don't know shit.
So Nancy, we're gonna go to the next person and listen. Nancy, you've taken up. Thank you, and we want to ask that everybody else be respectful of the place that we're in. I know this is a community conversation, but we are in a place, Nancy.
You might not get it again.
We want to ask that you have.
Oh, I'm done here. I said what I had to say.
Thank you.
My voice is deserved. Be blessed.
Thank you.
COVID.
We're not trying to, please have your mask on. We're not asking anybody not to say what they need to say. We just want to be mindful of the language that we're using while we're in the church.
I apologize.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Love you, Randy Thompson.
Felicia.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, good evening. Sorry about my late. I'm dropping my son off in Ohio for college, freshman year. Tired a couple days. But I have, I'm going to say ditto to what the young lady said before and cold talk, because something that addressed what Banu said to this gentleman right here, why it's important to have this gentleman on there from the Black Prosecutors is because any black or minority individual cold talks, we switch, right? We know how to function in your world, and we also know how to function in our own. So we know how to translate the difference, right? And what we've seen right there is a woman that suffers from post-traumatic stress. She suffers from post-traumatic stress, as most minorities in this area do, because we've been living in the Wild Wild West and under pressure and a melting pot for 200 years here in Asbury Park. So to understand what's happening here is to understand being cries and cries for help and no one ever coming. To have a place where none of these things like police officers standing in front of polling places, right? Cops beating and stealing, right? Pressuring officials, pressuring people, right? You don't understand how it is. What she said was exactly right, where it starts at the top, right? You can't expect to keep civil in the street when, again, how can she go and report her brother when she shows up at the door, you see her passion and her hurt as a threat, and she might not come out of that experience. And I'm not saying it to be dramatic. I'm saying it as I watched all 45 minutes of Asani Bess's, the last moments of his life. I watched all 45 minutes in Trenton, right? I had the addition to watch it on the screen as big as a wall, to rewind it, watch it again. Even though I was told when the shooting would happen, it still caught me off guard. So I rewound it and watched it 3 more times, right? So I seen a man in pain, suffering from something, that needed someone to talk to them, right? Not aggression. All right, I also seen a cop standing behind multiple plates of glass. So he wasn't under any real threat, right? But I seen also a man that didn't make it out of that experience, and also heard that man speaking, saying that there will be someone to talk him down there in 15 minutes. That's what the police officer was saying amongst themselves in the recordings previous, right? So we live in this. And also to live in the fact that a year before that, a gentleman in having another mental health experience, had a pair of scissors and did not make it out of that experience also, right? We live in this. We've been beaten. We've been hurt, right? Where do we go? What do we do? I'm not sitting here, as you should have multiple of these so people can tell their passion, because until they get a chance to be heard, until they work out their vote, their passion and their pain, they won't be able to hear you or sit down at the table with you to come up with solutions. But because I've been at this table before, I come here with solutions, right? Solutions that better fit our community. When I stood at the march standing next to that man, and we called for to take down the jump out boys, as we called them here for 20 years, right? Put them in regular clothes. Right? There would be no, put a camera on them. There would be no recording of Asani Bess if the person from Officer was not in plain officer's uniform with a camera on him. Because he didn't walk around like that the years before. We're going to sit and speak about, there was a report done as use of force, right, for Asbury throughout New Jersey. He was the second highest, with the number of 46. Oh, hold on, I wrote it down because my phone was dying. Right, I want to say 46 or 46. He was the second highest individual use of force in Asbury Park. The first, Officer Warnick, was who he referred to in his lawsuit against the city. That also talks about there's no accountability. And as much as I like the cops, as much as I walk around and I am pleasant because my mother raised me well, right, and my father raised me well, I'm not going to sit here and act like there's a problem from the top. And like the young lady said previous, to go to the prosecutor's office, it was hand in hand, right, or disappearing or non-existing, because in this town there is no reports. So it says. Also, to sit back and what was just published, I can't find on the city's website of officers who had disciplinary actions. Right? I can't find it on the website. I've been there multiple times. I'm a person that knows that it's supposed to be there. I know how it's supposed to be labeled, and it's not there. It's not accessible. And if it is there, the link that could be it doesn't open. Again, where do we go? What do we do? First, we have to address, and also to know that your office is over more things, because things are intertangled. Right? I was told not to talk about too many things, but there's things intertangled. Like the fact that for the last, I want to say, 15 years, the violence in young people have increased by huge jumps and leaps. Well, at the same time, our only community center at the time where people feel uncomfortable for us, by us, FUBU, has been debunked, dysfunctional, right? Lost nonprofit status, traded nonprofit status, this, that, all the others. But in the meantime, there's no place for the kids to go to congregate. There's no place to go to play basketball. There's no place to go to do any of these things. Your office are in charge of these nonprofit entities, right? There's have to be some unique kind of addressing of these situations. Again, and then also, if we have to fire, we have to suspend, we have to have accountability. The previous AG promised, and I believed him, the COVID happened, right, to help us craft a CCRB, right? We need a functional one to the top. I've heard your last one saying the laws do not sustain how much we want, so we've been petitioning to change the laws. But in the meantime, we need your hand in saying, Asbury Park, I will craft something to make your people here feel safe and that they're heard. And support the officials who want to say something and don't, or the people who don't want to say anything, right? We have to take them off the table. We have to make sure that the people of the community pays attention and are heard, because we're not. We're not erratic. We've just been under a lot of pressure for a lot of times. And that makes our superpower great, for us to stand up in the midst of 200 years of oppression. Cops inside of the police department called crabs, right? Their job was just to make sure minorities stayed down. This is the culture that we grew up under. This is the culture, cops walking up and down the streets. These are the people that we see, and this isn't a story for us, we see it. So when you say you have to come here, this has to be the first. But then you should be at the table drafting up something, right? How to roll through the policies. So we can take that part and take it to the legislators and make sure we pass it. So we have something to feel safe here. There won't be any change in any kind of violence when the biggest gang in town are the police officers, right? And there are a lot of great police officers. There's a group inside, I'm trying to pull it all together. There's a group inside of the police officers that are also community people, that are also teachers and firefighters. They're called the Kaziks. They're young people from this community, right, that went off to become professionals, that come back to help the community. On top of those jobs, there are also the football coaches. They're the person that they go to in the midst of these times, right, when you can't trust the person next to you, right, when you can't trust that cop over there, but Officer Young will hear you, right, and actually do his best to help you, right? These are things, those are part of the cure. Now, I can't sit here and tell you all the cures right now because it's a few minutes. And I can talk forever. Anyone here knows me knows that to be true, right? Knows that to be true, right? But I'm going to tell you, I want to come to you with some facts. And I'm going to come with facts because, in fact, I don't have to come with you because you know the facts of this area. Monmouth County is a black hole of information. Nothing else in this state happens like it happens here in Monmouth County. And we're saying to you, and I don't know how clear we can say, we need your help here. We do not want to live in violence. We do not want to live in poverty. We don't want to live under a constant pressure of assault. We want to live safe. And just to tie this up, as I've been suffering through, the census report came in, right? In 2010, the black, African-American blacks in this community were 51% of the population. 2020, 10 years later, we are 33% of the population. How does that happen? That's a super gentrification. That's not just regular gentrification, that's a super gentrification. And we're going to say it how? We're going to talk about no economic growth. We're going to talk about poor education, and we're going to talk about harshly, overly policed and ridiculed. We are 7% of Monmouth County's population, African Americans. We make up almost all of the prisons. That is statistically impossible out of being only 7% of the population. That shows, that is the proof. Like I said, I don't have to come with you with the proof. You have it. That is statistically impossible. So that says that we're over-policed, and we're harassed to the part of where people are picking up and leaving in droves. Those are thousands of people. That's not a couple hundred. That's not a few. Those are thousands of people that have got up and picked up and left. So again, we're saying we need your help. We don't want to be the crazy fanatics or those Asbury people or those Asbury. We are the solution and the cure to the issue. We have to be at the table to deal with it. And that's to say.
Thank you. And look, I think a lot of the things that you said are right. You're not a crazy fanatic. You aren't. The pain that you're expressing, the pain that the last speaker expressed, is real, and it's understandable, and we hear it and we respect it. And I know there have been specific incidents here in Asbury that you're concerned about, but I think we can't think about these as specific incidents. We have to put it in the context of 400 years of injustice, right? Injustice that starts with folks being brought over on slave ships, folks being dispossessed for centuries, a lot of folks who came up from the South to New Jersey looking for a better life who were denied it through first legal segregation and later through an even more invidious form of prejudice of redlining and defunding of schools and mass incarceration. And if you look over 4 centuries, you see it happening over and over and over and over again to black communities in this country. And the anger is real and understandable and tangible, and we get it and we understand it. And I know how, when you look at any individual incident, you have to put it against that context. I can't say that I will ever understand what it's like to be a black person in this country. To have the conversation with your child about what happens if you get stopped by an officer. To have to put up with the indignities of a stop that you believe was not justified. I will never have to deal with that. And there are so many in this room who will, who do, who've experienced it throughout their lives. What we can do is that we can listen to you, we can hear about your concerns, we can sit with you to try to come up with solutions. And these problems are so real and so broad and so systemic that we're not going to be able to fix them overnight. But we can sit with you and we can work bit by bit to try to make it better. Part of the reason why we created this office several years ago is because we recognized that there are too many communities in this state that don't trust their local law enforcement agencies and they don't trust their county prosecutors' offices. Now, I think that there are good reasons to trust local police departments, and I think there are good reasons to trust county prosecutors' offices, but we recognize that not everyone shares that trust. And especially when you put it against 4 centuries of systemic injustice, I can understand why there's a lack of trust. But part of the reason why we created a statewide unit is because we wanted to have a place where people could go if they felt like they were not being heard in their local community. So that if you raised an internal affairs concern in Asbury Park or in Newark or in Camden and you felt like you didn't get due consideration, you had somewhere else that you could raise it. And we brought in folks who are committed to doing this right and doing this well and doing it fairly. And I want you to know, and I want everyone else to know in this room, that if there are allegations of bias, if there's allegations of improper policing, of over-policing, let us know. Give us the information so that we can investigate it, and if necessary, we can prosecute it. We owe that to everyone in this community. And I hope that you will trust me when I say this is not the only time we're going to be in Asbury, that this is not the kind of thing that you fix with a single meeting, and that we will be back to listen to you and to, more importantly, to work with you on solutions.
Hi, I'm new here. My name is Casey. Thank you for the words, and congratulations, by the way, on your interim position. Hoping that it'll be a permanent position. A quick answer, I mean, just to piggyback off, I'm not black, I'm not a minority, but I do share in their anger. And I mean, a quick fix would be to make sure the police force emulates the demographics of the state. So, you know, if it was 51% black, then 51% of the police force should be black. If they're Asian, same thing. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I've been volunteering for over 30 years, socially, on a social level. But then things are getting worse. Things are getting much, much worse. Poverty is up, disease is up, crime is up, all of that is up. So then I thought, well, the way to change things is to get involved politically. Not to run for office, but to campaign. And I campaigned for Murphy, and I campaigned for Hotelling, and I campaigned for Gopal. I campaigned for all those people. And I found out something really important. Council people. First of all, Hotelling is a great person. Murphy's he's my favorite. Vin Gopal is great. So I'm not saying anything against them. But the council should be your eyes and ears. And what I found is corruption at the council level. Council members have the power to hire and fire police officers. So the Office of Integrity and Accountability, you know, I celebrated when the previous AG came up and said, this is the office we're going to have. And I actually sent proof about corruption that's going on at the local level. A lot of corruption. Didn't hear word one. No investigation was started. And I know there wasn't an investigation started because no one requested copies of emails, no one requested copies of documentation. So it's nice that you're here telling us about the Office of Integrity and Accountability, and a portion of that is political corruption, which kind of allows these police officers to just run rampant. But honestly, it's not working. I haven't heard anything. No one called me back, no one emailed me back, and no one has even started an investigation. So with all due respect, I'm being really friendly about this. Why should we believe you? You know what I'm saying? Like, why should we believe that this office is actually going to do something?
So why don't, Tom, do you want to come up and talk a little bit about the corruption investigations we do?
So I don't, you didn't give your last name, and I don't remember getting it, although it's possible that it came in. So things can be corrupt. Let me say this. Things can be corrupt in a generic sense, in that they're not working right, the people are profiting.
It wasn't that.
Okay, well then, we'll follow up. Give me your information, I'll follow up with you and make sure it's investigated. We do cases of bribery, kickbacks.
It was bribery.
Okay.
And campaign finance, breaking campaign finance laws, and bid rigging. It was all of it.
Well, I'll have to see what happened. If it is, we'll investigate it. If it's in the statute of limitations, I mean, that's one thing we do have. It's got to be within 6 years typically for us. If it's older than 6 years, that's hard for us to do things with, but. Okay, well, give me your. Okay, well, I can tell you, we get dozens of complaints every week, and we look at them. Some of them we open full investigations, some of them we open more other investigations, some we refer to other people that is more appropriate. Not everyone, sounds like yours are things that we would investigate. Sometimes people send us information about, where's my social security check? Well, that's not something we do, but, you know, so.
My question to piggyback off of that is how many people are in your office at this time? How many people are in your department?
In my department, broadly? No, I'm trying to, I don't keep track that way. I would say probably 70 people, 70 people.
I'm telling you, in New Jersey, this is one of the most states that have this issue. Right? It's a nice way to say it. I think you need a little bit more. I know it's hard with the math.
Yeah, sorry.
Right? I said, in a state here in New Jersey, where we have a lot of issues in that manner, we probably need a little bit more.
Well, I'm always looking for somebody, the Attorney General will back me up here. I'm always asking for more resources, so.
Then I'm also going to say, in Monmouth County, where you have a black hole of information, things disappear. Things disappear very quickly, or very slowly and profoundly disappear.
Well, I'm going to see, there's somebody, and I can't remember who, but somebody said they couldn't find the information about the discipline, so we'll check into that.
I'm going to tell you, you won't be able to find them.
Well, I can tell you, we'll find it, or we'll work with the prosecutor to fix it so you can find it. Now, the answer may be there isn't any for that. That was only a 6-month period of time. Now, remember, because of the lawsuit, it was only 6 months. The discipline had to be finalized within that 6 months in order to go up on the website. So it may be there isn't any, but I will talk to the prosecutor and we'll figure out why it is. And I know sometimes it's hard to find. I can't find things on our own website sometimes. So and it should be on our website.
Then I'm also going to say, you went off the website, I'm thinking about files disappearing from complaints files.
Oh, complaint files. Well, that.
Files disappearing with the Internal Affairs Department or different things in that manner, because it would go back in our records. I know,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right.
You know,
I'll sit down. I'm disrupting the flow here.
Tion and then Randy and then.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. They should be relatively quick and easy to answer. My first question is pretty simple. You spoke before about the grand jury, and one of the things that you said over and over again was relevant evidence. Who is it that is determining what evidence is relevant for a grand jury?
Do you want to do all the questions and then we'll answer, or do you want to just do one at a time?
I can do a couple because. All right, cool. My second question is it assumed, absent direct evidence to the contrary, that an officer is being truthful in his statements? Is that the general assumption? I'd really like to understand that a little bit better. Third question, what are the requirements for the claim of self-defense or fear for life when an officer kills or assaults a citizen? What are those requirements?
All good questions, sir. So with respect to the first, I believe, was the relevant evidence. So when we meet before the grand jury presentation, meaning the Deputy Attorney General, myself, Tom, sometimes other lawyers, we try to make that determination. But we are not the only ones who make that determination. The grand jury is told that we have whatever we have. So whether it's statements, investigative reports, obviously autopsy report, videos, and they can then ask for anything else that they would like to see. Now, I understand that they are not attorneys, and if you haven't walked through the whole investigation, maybe you don't, maybe it's hard to know what to ask for, but I can represent to you that, you know, and of course it's your choice if you accept what I'm telling you, but we make a bona fide, genuine effort, not just one mind, but as many minds as are involved in the case, to determine what the grand jury needs to hear, what is relevant, what is direct, and we do our level best to present that to them. I can tell you that the grand jurors are not inert. They are citizens and residents such as yourself. They do ask questions.
Do officers, the officer union, or attorneys for the officers have any say in what evidence can and cannot be presented to a grand jury?
So let Tom finish it.
Because it's hard, because I've been in this position too, where you're trying to explain a situation. We set up rules, so we're just not winging it on every case, deciding, well, this is relevant, this isn't. If there's if the officer that did the shooting, let's say, if he gave a statement, the jury hears the entire statement. We play the entire statement, start to finish. If there's an eyewitness that gives a statement, the grand jury hears the entire statement of the eyewitness. If there's a video of the incident, the entire video is played. But sometimes, I'll give you an example. We take a ring, maybe the incident got captured on a ring camera, someone's security video, and as part of our investigation, we took a week's worth of that ring camera just to see what was on it. So we got days and days, don't have anything to do with it. We're going to play the 10 minutes or 5 minutes that show the shooting that happened. We're going to say, you want to watch another 2 weeks? God bless. But that's what we mean by relevant. If there's an eyewitness, their testimony is going in. If there's the shooter themselves, that person's testimony is going in. Usually it's a man, not always. And the autopsy always goes in. All those things are going in automatically. It's just things on the periphery that we may not. If we interviewed 5 witnesses, they said, I didn't see anything. Well, we're not going to put that in there because it's a waste of time. That's kind of what we're talking about. I
understand. No, just in the essence of that question, what I was really trying to get at here was the follow-up that I'd asked, which is, do the police officers, the police union, or the attorneys for the police officers have any input or any say as to what type of evidence is presented to the grand jury, or fighting against what evidence is presented to the grand jury?
No, sir. The attorney is not present at the grand jury. The only I guess decision they would make is whether they want to come in person and testify or not.
Got you. And is it assumed, in absence of direct evidence to the contrary, that an officer is being truthful in their statements?
Well, assumed by whom? By us? Or by the grand jury?
By the grand jury, by individuals involved.
I mean,
very often what we find ourselves in situations in, and I'm sure we can all attest to this, is kind of like the officer's word versus the citizen's word, right? So in a situation like that, it is the citizen's belief that, generally speaking, an officer's word is taken over the citizen's word. So I would really like to address that with the attorneys in the room and ask, is that generally the case? Is it generally assumed that in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, that an officer is being truthful in his statements?
Well, I'll take the first stab at an answer, and maybe some of my colleagues want to jump in as well. In a jury, meaning a regular trial jury context, the trial jurors are told what I believe our attitude is as well. An officer's credibility is judged the way any other person's is judged, on its own merits. An officer is not presumed to be truthful. An officer is also not presumed to be untruthful. The officer's testimony has to be judged in light of what other evidence we have. So no, we do not assume necessarily that because an officer said something, that's the case. We investigate for that purpose. And again, not in every case, but increasingly there's video that is also laid against what we're being told. Tom, do you have?
I would only add, that's really what the grand jury does. I mean, it's really not up to us. The grand jurors individually will make their own mind up about who they believe, who they don't believe. If an officer says one thing and a civilian witness says something else, it's going to be up to them, the 23 of them, to collectively decide, I believe it or I don't believe it, and they're going to talk about it in private and make that decision. It's not up to us, it's up to them.
Appreciate your answers. In the essence of time, I just want to ask this one last thing, and then I'll take my seat. We talked a lot today about what happens for fatal incidences when it comes to police officers, but there are far more non-fatal incidences that are plaguing our communities. And so my question kind of relates to, I know you guys are really here, you're talking about how you're trying to do your best in order to really tackle this massive issue. But if I were to take a little segment from the Bible, in the incidents where the children of Israel were pretty rowdy and rambunctious, and it was difficult for Moses to get a hold of all of them. And the advice that he was given was to find those in your that are wise and pull aside and take out leaders from amongst them. That way you can deal directly with those leaders. In a situation like this, I find that relevant in the sense of a civilian complaint review board, a CCRB. You are trying to take on everything all by yourselves, instead of establishing or really helping to support a CCRB in these communities that partners with you to be able to see what's going on at a microcosm inside the community, without trying to figure out how we get every incident to you or if every incident needs to come to you. There is no shortcut to this. There has to be a CCRB in every community, especially minority communities and communities of color. There is no way around that. You can try and do everything that you want to do, and you have the best of intentions. I believe that wholeheartedly. But with 70 guys on your staff, however many guys on your staff, and an insane number of people in the community, there is no way you can handle it all. There must be a CCRB.
So I want to address 2 points. I want to address non-fatal police encounters and then also talk about the CCRB. So non-fatal police encounters, because there are many more non-fatal police encounters than there are fatal police encounters, we don't have the staff to do it internally ourselves. If there are particularly high-profile ones, we'll take them on ourselves.
That's why the CCRB is so important.
Understood. But that still means that they are investigated and, when appropriate, prosecuted. So we work with the county prosecutors, the 21 county prosecutors across the state, in order to make sure that those cases are fully investigated. Understood.
Which has an inherent problem in and of itself, right?
So a couple of things that I'll point out. We created some general rules that apply to all use of force investigations, both the fatal and the non-fatal ones. So, for example, and this is something that Carolyn talked about at the beginning, whenever there's going to be an investigation into a use of force incident, whether it's fatal or non-fatal, we do a conflict check at the beginning to make sure that whoever is going to be investigating that case, there's no reason to think that they're going to be biased in favor or against the officers who they're investigating. And so whether it's going to be handled by the AG's office or by the county prosecutor, we go through that process. So we do what we can to make it a fair process. In addition, what we have done is, over the last year, we've created a statewide database that is available for anyone to go online and see. We have a policy that exists in New Jersey that whenever there is a use of force by a law enforcement officer against any civilian in the state, anywhere in the state, that law enforcement officer is required to, within 24 hours, report that information to the Attorney General's office, which we then have. There's 70 pieces of data that have to be submitted about that use of force incident, which then is made available online for anyone in the public to see. So that way, any one of you can go on and see that information and see where use of force is taking place. Among the information that is on there is the race of the officer and the race of the person who is injured. That allows you to see what is going on and to hold us and to hold law enforcement accountable if you think that we are not responding properly. And we do that because we want you to have transparency into the process, and we want you to hold us accountable because we recognize this can't be done by us alone. We need to do this in partnership with the community, which then transitions to the second point about a civilian review board. We're happy to work with Asbury on a civilian review board. We are. And we're happy to sit down with you and talk through what that would look like. Now, the issue that we have is that there was a New Jersey Supreme Court decision that came down, I guess, last summer about the legal authorities for creating a civilian review board. The thing that is most relevant from that Supreme Court decision is that the New Jersey Supreme Court said that a town civilian review board does not have the legal authority to issue their own subpoenas. That under existing law, they cannot issue a subpoena to compel an officer to come and testify. That makes it very difficult for a civilian review board to get its job done, because if the officers are not willing to testify, it's very difficult to do the oversight that I think you envision when you think about a civilian review board. We are happy to sit down with any community that is interested in creating a civilian review board in light of that decision to figure out what we can create. It might be that it's not fully satisfactory, or it's not fully satisfying, because you're not going to be able to cut the subpoenas that I think you need to exercise proper oversight. In order to change that, there needs to be a change in the legislation. And so that is something that is pending before the legislature. The legislature has not passed that. It's not gone to the governor's desk. And so this is an example of we are the law enforcers, not the law writers. And if the legislature passes that law and the governor signs it, then it will be possible to issue subpoenas as part of a civilian review board, and we will work with communities when that comes.
Well, I'd be very excited myself, and I'm sure the group of people I work with, to sit down and talk with you in your office about what we can put together in place now and the impact and effect that it can have while we're waiting on that legislation to come through.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Hello, my name is Randy Thompson, an area resident and also from Help Not Handcuffs Incorporated. You need a minute?
No, just one second. I just want to say we're going to do Randy and then Danny, and then we'll wrap it up and we'll figure out what's next. All right? Thanks.
A quick thank you to Second Baptist who put this together. Thank you, Attorney General Andrew Burke, for being here. I also see our acting prosecutor for the county, Ms. Linsky. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Look, you're sitting in the city of Asbury Park. Myself and this community have been literally raped and have parts of our lives that will never be the same because of the institutions you serve. Okay, so I understand both of you are brand new. We don't have a relationship with you necessarily, but unfortunately there are no softball questions here. 2 quick points. You brought up the use of force report. We just had a press conference out here about a man who was sodomized by 3 Asbury Park cops, and when he complained in internal affairs, they retaliated against him. All those cops are still on there. That would not appear in the use of force. You said to let you know if there was something, bringing you the information to go through the Office of Public Integrity and Accountability. 10 months ago, nearly a year, we were marching for Hassani Best. I was targeted to be arrested by the Asbury Park Police. The community relations officer was hiding and spying on us. We gave him that information. Nearly a year later, they can't figure out if anyone did anything wrong. So there's a question of legitimacy there. Here's the context for the questions I want to give you, okay? And I'm going to make it very concise. I spent the better part of a year this past time, okay, fighting with the city, and my mayor knows this. He's actually been vocal in me getting some of the documents, okay? I'm not going to say we're exactly of the same feather, but that's been getting the tort claims, okay, from the city. And there's about 50 lawsuits against Asbury Park police officers, and it's a nightmare of what they've done, from sodomizing a man, from beating a woman, from filming the police, from the murders of Hassani Best, the murder of James Manzo, you know, not helping a guy who was about to kill himself. All this stuff, attacking 2 black teenagers on the night when we had our 10,000 people here for our George Floyd rally, okay? Beating those teenagers, attacking a journalist. That's not what I want to talk to you about. What I want to talk to you about is the people who are supposed to watch the watchers. And that is, unfortunately, I have to point my fingers at you. Acting Prosecutor Linsky is the Monmouth County Prosecutors. It's the Attorney General. It's the prosecutor. There is no prosecutorial accountability, okay? We did a survey of the Seton Hall Law School staff. We said, when was the last time a prosecutor was held accountable? They wrote back, we cannot think of one. And that's in severe cases of malicious prosecution. And not when they go commit a crime, but when they do something wrong under the color of law, in their jobs, okay? The tort claims are revealing a harrowing picture, okay? We'll start at the county level, okay? There were sheriff's officers that beat a woman so bad in town, who was just a part of the protest, that she's losing the loss of her limbs. They're not identifying those officers. They're refusing to release the body camera video, which is something quite popular. We had to fight against that to release the body cam for Hassani Best. Okay? We understand that even at the Attorney General level, okay, and this may not be, you know, comfortable to hear, but your predecessor, Gabriel Gruel, okay, who did some very progressive things, but he called the journalist who was arrested and beaten here in town, okay, and that was clearly an extrajudicial arrest. Okay, you got Senator Booker saying we don't tolerate that here. You had Gruber Gruel saying we don't tolerate that here. Do you know what Gruber Gruel did? He did nothing. He let those cops retire. I watched the retirement video posted on the Asbury Park Facebook page. That they're proud of it. So my question to you is this, Andrew, as a human being, okay, and as someone intensely empowered at this moment, Lauren, I don't want to hear that you hear me. I don't want to hear that you understand. I want to hear from you that there's a commitment to empower a consent decree of the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office to empower this community to hold prosecutors accountable in addition to the police. And I want to know who on your staff you want to hook us up with right now. That's what I would like to hear. Take a moment and think about it. If you can't do a consent decree, I want to hear the next best thing or the next greater thing. Because not ever having a prosecutor held accountable, that doesn't make sense. That's just our inquiry. Alexander Shalom with the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey. Prosecutors sometimes get a letter in the file. That's it. Prosecutorial errors, they call them. People's lives are destroyed. So I want to hear your response. I want to hear how we can work with your office, how we can work with you. The institutions you serve have harmed us, and sometimes in ways that will never be repaired. Okay? And I may not be the demographic to say that, but I've experienced that myself, and I've watched that here in my community for 20 years. So I'd like to hear those responses. Thank you.
So I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm actually not totally sure what it is that you're requesting, but I understand. Like I think that the basic gist of this is that you're concerned that the prosecutors who work in our office and who work in the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office are not being held accountable for improper activity that they engage in. Right, I'm trying to figure out what exactly you mean by that. But so here's what I suggest. There are mechanisms that are available to hold prosecutors accountable. I think what we would need are specific allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. If you have those allegations, like, please come forward to us. We are happy to take them in, and we will follow up on it.
Just to go back to the first thing I said, with the allegations of when I was being attacked by a cop, we gave the information then, and it's almost a year later, and they can't give any information as to whether or not they've done anything. So that's why we want to go outside of the typical institutions, the Department of Justice, and we want to hear. I want to hear you say, and I'm sure, I'm not speaking for anyone else, but I bet they're kind of not against this. They'd like to hear you say you're not going to be an obstacle to that, and you would support that. That's a question for you, Mr. Burke, and
So I think
if you want your prosecutors to be held accountable, that's a question.
So I'm not going to agree to something that I don't understand, but we're happy to talk with you and try to understand this better.
Will you help us prosecute?
Yeah, if that's the question, if there are allegations of prosecutors who broke the law, who violated criminal activity, then we'll investigate them. And if we need to prosecute them, we'll prosecute them. And if you want to come forward with allegations about that, we're happy to receive it. Sir.
Okay, how you doing? You done? Go ahead, man. Okay, no, let me finish first. You talk too long. All right. First to the brother from Essex County. I taught North for 27 years at North Tech, and it was the best 27 years of my life I did. You know, and I have said to people in reference to CCRBs and going after bad cops, follow the lead of Ross Baraka and the community of North, which means that these things will not be done unless your elected officials get behind the people who voted them in or didn't vote for them, and then we can get things done. So, you know, and I respect what you've done in North. Like I said, I was there a long time. But to everybody over here, one thing you notice is that we have one thing that is not in common. That's the color of my skin and the color of your skin. Which means there are things that I have experienced in life that you will never experience, okay? That's my birthright. But there are a couple things that I have experienced and I know it's wrong. One, when you have someone who is accosted by the police, you go to internal affairs, and when you get to internal affairs, they flat out lie to you. And then you get the body cam footage, and you go, damn, they did lie to me, you know? But that goes on. Another thing, and I just need, you know, this is food for thought if you really want to serve the people. In Asbury, okay, brown and black people are still the majority, but yet that is not what is so on the police department, and that is not what happens during the hiring practices. And we have gone to the city on numerous occasions saying, how do we get more black and brown and Hispanic police officers in Asbury, and they go and they hide behind the Civil Service Act. That because of the Civil Service law, we cannot hire we have to give other people a chance to be hired in your town. which means you bring people in our town who don't even understand the demographics of our town, and you bring police officers into the town who are actually afraid of the people that they're policing. You know, that has to be fixed. And we are tired of hearing, oh, are in a position to realize that this is unfair to the people in the community. You know, and I just got to stand here and say that, you know, because that's how I feel. I got to get one more thing off my chest, and then I'm going to leave it alone. My phone actually. So, the other thing, when we go to the county, many times, to express our displeasure with something that may have happened with our babies, we look at officers in the county who come from our town, who are not receptive to our issues. One, because they got a pension. Two, because they have to protect their friends. And Miss, I forget your name, and forgive me. Okay. But you said when they go in front of a grand jury, if it's too many people from city X, you know, listening to this claim, it's like, no, you can't listen to this claim because you can't have people from our town policing our police. And this is an issue that we have. The police police the police. Now, I don't have that much of a beef with police here. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Okay? But you cannot have police from one town, especially when it gets to the county level, policing their friends. Because at that point, we don't get justice, and once again, it's just us. Okay, and with that, you know, you can answer it any way you want to, but these are corrections that need to be made. Thank you.
You have pointed out something that I forgot to say, and while I'm not proposing that this is a perfect solution, we do have all of these grand jury presentations in front of the state grand jury. So it's not the county grand jury, it's the state grand jury. Again, that's not perfection, but it's one more step removed. So that's just one small point I wanted to make. And I think BAG was going to also respond to some.
Yeah, the only thing I was just going to point out was on the civil service question. So there are towns that are civil service towns, and there are towns that are not civil service towns, and the rules for hiring folks obviously are different. My understanding is that individual towns can opt into the civil service rules or opt out of it, and so any town that wants to opt out could opt out, and then would not be subject to those requirements.
Every time we've asked about that, we've always gotten.
Do you want to, if you know the answer, yeah, sure.
So one thing I just want to say about the civil service rules, and it's an excellent question that you asked. I recently put together a panel of Monmouth County police chiefs from civil service towns with Senator Gopal and other stakeholders to address this very issue, because it is real, and I understand completely the frustration that you have. My understanding is that it is not very easy for towns to opt out of civil service once they opted in, and the towns that opted in did so, I think, in the 1950s or 60s, and are sort of just stuck with this system that exists right now. One thing that we're looking to our local legislators to help us do is to create a pilot program where towns could opt out of civil service for a period of time to see if that would actually help them attract minority police officers that reflect the communities that they're serving. So it is a very real issue. I'm working on it actively and aggressively to try to come up with solutions. There are some legislative hurdles in front of us because civil service is this massive organization that has existed for many years. But Senator Gopal was extremely receptive, and we're working together on pilot programs and proposed legislation to try to make a difference. The other thing that I'd just like to address that a couple of people have said here tonight, which is that how internal affairs complaints against police officers are reviewed. I can't address specific instances that you may be referencing,
But I will say that over the last few years, our office has prosecuted more than, I think the number's about 30 police officers. We will not tolerate police officers who break the law. And it is my pledge, and it is the commitment of the people that are working with us in our professional responsibility unit, that there is no place in law enforcement for bad police officers. I know that does not address some of the grievances and upset that I've heard about from years past. I recognize that. I share the empathy and sentiment that the AG mentioned when he said he can't possibly understand the shoes that many of you in this room have walked in, nor can I. But I pledge to you that we are working aggressively to make sure that we have police officers who do the right thing. If you are in a situation where you feel that you need to make or want to make a complaint, you can always go to the local police department, but if you're uncomfortable with that, please come to us. Our doors are open. We will talk to you. We will do our best to address your issues. If you're unhappy with us, we will open the door for you to be heard by the Attorney General's office. So I just wanted to mention that, and you know, my office, our doors are open as well to address concerns that you have at any time.
30 out of how many?
Thanks. So I know that you all have plenty of questions, and we're grateful that you all came tonight. But our time is out, and we want to respect everybody's time, including our Acting Attorney General and all those who are here and present. And so it was mentioned, and I do hope that this can be the first of a series, right? And that we welcome you come back in this space and to come and to have more conversation right here in Asbury Park. I think this type of conversation is healthy, and this type of conversation is needed. And I really hope that you all felt heard. I do want to acknowledge that we have our mayor is in the house, and so we're so grateful. Mayor John Moore, right here in Asbury Park, so grateful to have him. And we have City Councilwoman Yvonne Clayton here, who's also here. We want to acknowledge her. So grateful. Our police chief, Chief Kelso's in the back, and we got Captain back there too, and some of the officers from Asbury Park Police Department. So grateful to have you all here, and of course, we have our Monmouth County, is it interim or acting? Acting, there we go. acting Monmouth County Prosecutor, Lord Linsky, and then was it John McCabe? I was trying to get you a title in there, but John McCabe is here. That's right, Chief Detective. So we're glad to have them here also. Let's show them some love. And just so many others, right? So many others who are here, and we are glad, many community activists, those you are here tonight because you care about our community and the space and place that we live, and so we're grateful for that. And we want to thank the Acting Attorney General Andrew Brooke for coming here with your team to answer our questions, and we know that this is the beginning of a conversation, and we look forward to what's next. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out and whatever you have to say. Let's welcome him one more time.
Thank you. I know we've been here for a while, so I'm not going to say much more other than I just want to thank you all for coming out tonight. The fact that you're willing to be here and engage in a conversation means that you're willing to work with us to find solutions. And, you know, I promise you this is not the last time we'll be here. I look forward to talking with you more. So thank you.
Did you learn that when you went to law school that you can indict a ham sandwich?
I did not learn that.
You didn't learn that?
Thank you all for coming. Have a great evening, everybody.